Hey, everybody. I'm Victoria. Welcome to my villain era. Sometimes becoming your most authentic self means that you become the villain in somebody else's story, but that's okay because you're becoming the hero of your own. Today, we're talking about how to rewrite your story and what a powerful practice this can be. And our friend Cherry, who I have on the podcast sometimes, Cherry actually told me, she goes, you need to talk to Amanda because Amanda's so good at this and this is what she does. And so I did know Amanda previously, but had not had a session with her. So I was very excited to talk with Amanda, to have a session with her, and to bring this to you as a modality for those of you who feel like you're repeating the same story in your head and maybe it's not benefiting you. So let me tell you a little bit about Amanda, and then she will tell us about like the fantastic things that she does and how this might benefit you, especially if you're on the path to being your best self in this space of your life. So, Amanda Roa is a transformational coach, podcast host, and the founder of Back to Heart Coaching, where she helps high achievers and healing seekers rewrite their stories, embody their authentic selves, and manifest their next level life. Through mindset work, somatic healing, breathwork, and identity transformation, Amanda guides others back to self love, purpose, and personal freedom. She is also the host of Back to the Heart podcast, where she shares conversations on healing, embodiment, and conscious creation. Welcome, Amanda.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for receiving me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. Actually, the first question that I have is, how did you get into this? Because you do a lot of different things, but it's all under basically what I would call some type of a healing modality where you're helping people to let go of the junk that they're ready to get let go of and become their best self.
Yeah, really I got into healing myself. I went through a physical health issue with endometriosis back in 2018, and at the same time my marriage was falling apart. My job that I had once loved was transitioning. It was changing. Leadership was changing. It was just a whole all of the pieces were crashing down on top of me. And at that point it just got worse and worse, and even got into just alcohol and drugs, and just not in the frequency that I wanted to be in. And I had to get to that bottom, that rock bottom that so many people want to talk about, before I woke up and said, okay, this isn't working. I'm going to have to find out something to break this pattern, to stop this Groundhog Day repeat of just spiraling down the hill. So whenever I did that, I started just diving in and working on myself. And whenever I did that, I found a couple of different communities. One led to another one. I started doing all of this healing, bringing in all this information to heal my body, to heal my heart. And it all made sense, in my head. I could learn it. I was understanding the information. I had listened to the podcasts, listened to the audiobooks, read the books, been to the events, and still I wasn't stepping into that version. I believed it was possible. I could see those other people that I was starting to surround myself with. I could see my life transforming in many ways, but still not really embodying that version that I believed was available to me, until I started looking at the language and at the words that I was using and the story that I had created around my worthiness. In fact, my name, Amanda, means worthy of love. And I had this whole story my whole life about what that story meant. And, the thing is with the stories is the details of the story aren't the most important part. It's what we allow this story to mean to us is what the story is, because we only see the story from our own perception. So I was seeing this story about my worthiness based on experiences growing up as a child, experiences in life. I had at that point, I had 2 marriages that didn't work out. I had all these health issues. I was in a job I hated, and just nothing going the way that, we were told, hey, if you check all these boxes, things are going to be exactly how you want it to be, right? So it wasn't. So whenever I started examining that story of me and recognizing the shitty way I was talking to Amanda, and it all was about my name and this whole story, like a whole plethora of stuff that was in there, that was holding so much space within my vessel, within my body, that all the things that I was learning might make sense, but I couldn't truly embody that until I acknowledged that that story was running where it actually originated. It's not had nothing to do with something that happened last week or last year. That story from last week, last year was something that originated from little 7-year-old Amanda. So I gotta take a break.
Wow.
I get like, I start talking and I'm like, okay, take a break, Amanda, and breathe. But it's so part of it. Like we get all into these stories and then that's where the breath gets trapped.
Wow.
So
So, um, that's I could really relate to this storytelling aspect because you're right. Like we do have stories about ourselves, about, they've been running in the background forever, right? And one thing so I've been on, like, I don't even know if you call it a healing journey. I've just been on a path to improve myself for a long time. And it's interesting. This year, I feel like I've kind of come over a little bit of a hump. One of the things I've had to do is like really check myself. What the words I say to myself every day, if they are not like, girl, you're awesome, I really have to check myself because those words, like, it lives rent free in your head and it has an impact and it doesn't mean anything. Like they're just thoughts.
they do mean
Sorry, go
something.
ahead.
They do mean something. That's the important part is that so often we think that what matters is what other people say, and we get caught up in the loop of like, I wonder what they're thinking or they're feeling, or like really these unanswered parts of other people. But it's what we're thinking about ourselves. And that's what was affecting me so much was the words that I was using with myself. Like you said, if you're not like pumping yourself up, and I wasn't even just not pumping myself up, I was beating myself up. I was, what the fuck,
Mm.
Amanda? That was so stupid, Amanda. And even just with my name, that's the only time I ever associated, like, thought about my name was whenever it was with something negative. So even whenever I would meet someone and have a conversation with somebody, that some people repeat, your name a lot. It's just some people do it and most people don't. But I would find myself looking back that I was even uncomfortable in those conversations. Like when people would say my name, I was like, why do they say that? Because that story was trapped in my body all around my name and the words that I was using to myself. So it's like, it's so powerful. So that's what I did. I first off acknowledged and realized that I was talking shit to Amanda. So at least acknowledging it and then stop saying those negative things to her, then practicing and saying the good things. Like you were saying, like saying those good things to me to a point where I realized that why did I have this difficulty with that? Where did that originate from? Because that didn't just happen, right? And that's where I got back to what that story was and found out what the story behind the story was and was able to go through this process, rewrite that story, understand what it meant to me in that moment, let it go, let it somatically like release through my body to actually step into who I really am and be proud of Amanda. Fuck yeah, I'm worthy of love. Of course that's my name.
I love that so much. I had Danny Moniz on here and we were talking about healing. We were talking about like, letting go of basically people who like are not nice to you. And one of the things that she mentioned to me was she goes, every time you think about a situation or you ruminate, and maybe it was like a sibling or a parent or your great uncle Steve who told you like you were a piece of trash, like whatever that thing is, you're actually sending energy to that person. And when she said that, I was like, dang, no wonder when you're ruminating, it's so exhausting because it is like sometimes the stuff that goes on in your head is really exhausting and you do have to check yourself.
Yeah, and it's whatever, those words carry a vibration and an energy. So if we're casting out those spells, we're casting out those words even towards someone else, we're actually receiving it. It's very powerful. And I did an episode about saying, I'm sorry, because people got in this huge habit of saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry all the time. And I was like, every time you say that, like you feel that energy. It's like, this
Yeah.
isn't something you just bumped in your elbow, you're 5 minutes late. Like, this is not like this. Let's save those words for, like, I apologize, like, so that sorry means something, because sometimes people would say, I'm sorry, and you're like, I don't fucking believe you. Again, it's about the words that we think.
Wow.
So somebody
Yeah.
could say it and be like, I don't think so.
Wow. Yeah. And you're right. Words do carry a vibration. And I love how you mentioned spells because a lot of times, and it's so funny. I have heard a lot of people say, we have to be careful about this or that spiritually. But you're right. We are saying spells every day in the things that we say to ourselves and also in the things that we say to other people. Like, why do we all say bless you when someone sneezes? Right. So
Yeah.
I just think about little things like that. You're absolutely right. The words are so powerful. And I think it's important to get to the root of what is with it. Why are you saying this stuff? And so I think sometimes it's habit, but sometimes I also think that, it's not habit. It's that maybe we heard it once and we decided that that was going to be our truth. Or like maybe you were a kid and you heard it and you're like, oh, but that's how it is true always. So I think that just the practice of paying attention to what we say is so powerful.
That's exactly true. That's where those stories that have come from, our parents, church, religion, politics, just society, that creates those stories that, like you said, we get in the habit and we don't realize how much we cast those spells in the words that we're speaking. Abracadabra actually means, with words I create.
Right.
It's just like, okay, these are the spells around us. So it's powerful.
Yeah. I'm at this phase where I'm really paying attention to how I talk to my body. Last year I gained some weight and it's like, of course you ask doctors and they're like, I don't know, you're perimenopausal or whatever. Like they have no ideas for me. And I had a story about how that was such an awful thing and like I need to get back in my skinny jeans and that sort of thing. And I didn't realize that I was beating myself up about 20 pounds, right? And instead of just picking healthy foods that I enjoy, what I was actually doing in my head was if we went out for Mexican food, I love fish tacos. Okay. So if we go for Mexican food, I'd be like, oh, the grilled, not the fried, because that's healthier, right? And then I'd feel good about myself. But then one day I was like, but damn, I love fried fish tacos. Why don't I just eat what I want? And then not feel bad about it. So it's been really an interesting little experiment for me. And I recently started following someone on social media who is a bigger size girl. And she was like, oh no, I'm sexy. I'm all these things. And she's really leaned into it. Her story is it doesn't matter how much I weigh, right? But again, like me having a story about how, oh, that's so awful. I really have had to check myself about putting limitations on myself. So it's just wild to me how this goes, everything seems to go back to the story.
It does every time.
Tony Robbins, he always says this. He says, change your story, change your life. And I believe that's 100% true. But he talks a lot about how he used the process of changing his story as a springboard for his career. I mean, the guy did okay for himself. So,
Yeah, he's made a couple bucks. He's given away a
right.
lot.
Just a few. Just a few.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about the process of how we had our session together and because it was really impactful and how other people can get in touch with you. Okay, so I had never heard about this type of modality that you do. And is this something that you created yourself? Is this like a culmination of different techniques that you learned from other healers?
Well, there's a combination of all the things I've learned over this healing process and a lot of different things that go into living my best life every day. But the one thing that really pushed me over into this next level is this four-step process, which I did learn from the Enlifted method. That is where I took a coaching certification and went through an entire process to learn how to, interestingly enough, it's to learn how to coach other people using the method. However, it cracked open a whole different level of myself during the training, which I'm like, whatever you do that, I feel like that really takes you to a whole different level of embodying what I learned because I mean, I felt it myself and went through this process. So
Mm.
that's where it comes from is the Enlifted method, and it has worked on me, and I've seen it hundreds, maybe thousands of times at this point. And it's one of those things where I keep thinking, well, maybe this time it's not going to work. I don't know why. There's something in my head at first thought that. So let's control our thoughts here and be cautious with my words.
Right.
I kept thinking like it's gonna no, it works every time. And it's just so profound to see a tool that can help, whether it's something small or it can help with something that is massive, like universal size. It's just, it's changed my life and I've seen it change so many others. So that's why I'm like, okay, this tool is something that anybody and everybody can use. Big day, big thing, small thing, any and all the things. So I've got to share this.
Yes, and I loved there were a couple things I really enjoyed about our session. Before we even got together, Amanda asked me to write out my story, and how I interpreted that was the thing that's really sticking in my craw these days. That's what I should write out because it's been on my mind and I feel like I paid too much attention to it as it is. And so what was so fascinating, so I write it out and I was not like I felt like I was not very emotional about it. And then Amanda asked me to read it and I'm like like I was so emotional about it. But it was so and of course I can laugh about it now, but there's something about speaking the story that you wrote that's on your heart that's really powerful. And so we started from there. So that was where we started this session. But I have to tell you, the most okay, Amanda, this has been so impactful for me because you said something to me. I don't know if you remember that you said this. You said to me, um, why do you have a sense of obligation for people that have no sense of obligation to you? And I was like, "Holy crap balls." Like, that is, like, mic drop. It was just, like, the bottom line of a lot of different things I'd been ruminating about for such a long time, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about the work that you do is getting to what is the thing? Like, what is the thing that, sometimes it's like we tiptoe around the thing, especially I'm not a big fan of talk therapy because I feel like it did not help me very much. I'm like, I talked for an hour. I still feel like shit. But when you can have a session with somebody and you get to the golden nugget, the root cause of what the thing is. I was like, this woman, like, I don't know what kind of witchcraft she just did, but she like went into my brain and figured all this out. Um,
Abracadabra.
right. Right? So that's, one of the things I thought was so beautiful about our session. Now, when you're working with somebody, is that your standard method of working with somebody? And I know that you mentioned that a lot of times people see you in, successive sessions. And I guess my other question is, I'm really interested to find if people like keep going over the same story in an iteration, or if they find that it's like, no, I've gotten to the root of this one thing. Now let's go over something else.
Yeah, lots of great pieces. So you may have to remind me. So the first thing is lots of times, okay, let me back up. We usually start out with a story of something that haunts us, something that annoys us. So those are a little bit different levels for us to work on. If there's something that's haunts you or something that's like right in front of you right now, oftentimes there we can get through that story and then there's probably another level. Now take out probably. There is another level of whatever story is bothering us now. There's something behind that story that's likely under 7 years old of where that story originated, the origin of the original story, you know? So in the first session, we can get to, okay, well, what's happening now and how and where is this sticking to us now? But then you go into multiple sessions in figuring out like I said, the original part and getting through what was that story and being able to release that story and rewrite that story. So if you can get to the core of the primary thing that's bothering you today, that's step one, right? And then as you do this a little bit more, and that can be, that might be 3 sessions, it might be 6, just depending, because oftentimes what comes up is you're in the middle of, okay, this was a story that I know was really impactful for me. And then as you're reading that aloud, which I want to go back to how you felt in that, how it was surprising of how it felt and why you felt that transition. So we get into those other stories, and you're like, "Oh, you know what? This also reminds me of this time whenever it was my brother's 6th birthday and blah, blah, blah happened." Well, that story is actually another piece of the story that you thought was the original story. So it ends up kind of snowballing to
Mm.
get a few different really core stories out. And then once you're able to do that, you can see this process yourself. And then if something comes up on your day to day, you can utilize these tools to release those pieces that are happening now so that you're not sitting and having a conversation with somebody about what happened now in 15, 20 years from now, like we are right now, of something that happened 35 years ago, you know? So it's like
Yeah.
let's get understand the process itself by getting to the OG of the problem, and then you can utilize this tool for anything just moving forward. For example, it was last year, but it was last year I was going on a trip with my husband to meet some friends. We got to the airport way early. Like usually I'm that person that's like racing to the gate, I don't like to spend a lot of time at the airport, but we got there and we had like an insane amount of time, like 2+ hours, which I normally never. We're at the gate 2+ hours, and then got so incredibly distracted, we missed our flight. We missed our flight. I was sober, I was awake, I was at the gate, and we missed our flight. Like I thought my head was gonna explode. I didn't know if I was gonna injure him or me or the flight attendant, whatever. So we had to wait for the next flight. And I utilized this right then because it was going to ruin my day. It was going to ruin my trip. It was like old me, that one thing that in hindsight was so simple, but just out of control, unexpected, and just went. And then it would have affected our relationship. It would have affected the trip. And in that instant, I was like, okay, take the breath, go through this process, write it down, read it out, add the breaths in between, go through the whole 4 steps. And I let it go. And I was able to just breeze on through. And it still took us like another 10 hours to get to Denver. It was wild, but it was okay. It was okay. It changed the story. It didn't stick to me.
Wow. It didn't stick to me. I love that. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. We can let these little things just annoy the heck out of us. And, you're going on vacation, you know, uh, everybody wants to like be having a good time, like let stuff go on vacation, like feel like you have a sense of freedom for a while. You know what I mean? Like that's what everybody wants. But we can become easily aggravated by all of these things just because we're human, right? But
Yeah.
there's so much to it though. Because you're absolutely right. You could have been like, oh, this ruined the whole thing for me. And instead, it was all okay.
Yeah.
When someone is working with you, what do they typically is it kind of like me where it's like, "Oh, this one thing's been gnawing at me," or is it more like, "I totally want a life transformation. How can I, you know, be the best me moving forward?" that sort of thing. So which type of clients do you generally get? Because I'm really interested in, like, I had a particular experience just from one session working with you, but I'd also love to hear about the other experiences some of your other clients have had too, because I feel like this is so impactful that it can really make a big impact in anyone's life.
Both, any and everything in between. That's the great thing about this is this tool can work for any of those pieces, but oftentimes it's people who have been doing the healing work, they starting to understand, they're aware of, okay, this is a pattern that keeps coming up, or hey, I've been really successful in my career and taking care of my body, but relationships, this is just like, I really want an emotionally safe, loving, supportive partner, all these things, but this shit keeps happening. Or maybe it is, I
Mm.
love my purpose and money is great and my relationship's great, but I'm just, yes, loving your body, right? And talking to your body is important, but if it's not like in your optimum of where you believe it could be, then there's a different piece that can be worked through depending on what area you're working on. So oftentimes it's just whatever is the primary headline that's in someone's life. And, like I said, I've worked through it, whether it was with the health, with relationship, with stepping into my purpose and my career. So it's worked for all of these different things. It's worked for grief. I mean, tremendously. And so if somebody feel like they've been doing the work, right? And they've been trying to heal themselves, they've been doing these things, they've been listening to the audiobooks. I follow it, I believe it, I know that this is possible, but I'm just still not stepping into that place fully. Maybe I am in this area of my life, in this area, but like I want it all. Like that's possible to I love my life. And I'm telling you, if you're not waking up, and I'm not saying you got to think that first thing because I'm still a human and there are plenty of days where I wake up and I'm like, ugh. But if at some point in the day you're not thinking, I fucking love my life that I get to live, then there's more. So, what is that
Mm.
place where you're like, there's more? And it's okay to want more. We don't have to fall into this story of unworthiness. I don't deserve this. And even if you start receiving, if you don't fully, that's a big problem for people is we don't know how to receive anything. So that kind of gets me off on a different topic. But receiving has just been what a whole nother conversation.
Isn't it amazing that we are so good at giving to other people,
Oh
but
yeah.
receiving can be so hard? And I once heard someone say, how do you expect to manifest big money, big love, big relationships if you can't receive the smallest thing?
Yeah. And, I believe an additional part of it is because we're so full of all that shit. All of those old stories are so stuck in our bodies and not just our own, right? Because it's our own perception, but everybody else that's been giving us their dramas and traumas. And we have this thing called trauma bonding. And especially if you're an emotional, empathetic person, we haven't been taught how to regulate and protect our own energy. You can still be a friend, you can still be supportive, but if you're not protecting yourself, then on top of your own stories, now you've got everybody around you stories weighing in on you. So even if stuff was ready to come in, the universe wants to give you everything. But if there's no space to put it, it's like going to the grocery store and getting all this new stuff, and you come back and you've got all this old moldy shit in the fridge. You gotta clean that stuff out before you put the fresh vegetables in there.
Yes. And
So
that's such a good way to put it too, because, you think about even energetically, like we're all energy, right? So if you have had interactions with someone who has really like really junky energy, they're really negative, whatever, that impacts you. And even from a neuroscience perspective rather than an energetic perspective, there was a study about like being around a negative coworker. Have you heard this one?
oh, yeah, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it's contagious. When you're around a negative coworker, you are much more likely to have like performance issues and work at a lower level as a team and things like that. It is really very much impacting, even though we don't realize it. But yeah, we have to, I really think we have to protect ourselves, like mentally, our mindset, and also like what we're thinking, but also from an energetic perspective. And I just heard someone talk this week about how she practices energetic hygiene before going to bed and how like she has this whole ritual that she does. She was like, because it's everything I do is to cleanse my energy so that when I go to bed, I'm not taking everybody else's junk with me. So I
Yes.
thought that was such a great perspective too, because something I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, I do that after every session that I have. With every person I'm working with, and even with, any of these extra conversations, like, we have our own energy, and though obviously our energy here is good, it's still we're all vibrating in our own space, that it's like, "Okay, that moment is over. I'm gonna cleanse and be okay and finish with that moment. I don't need to go back and think, 'What did I say something weird?'" Or, it's done, you know?
Mm,
But you're exactly
yeah,
right. We
exactly.
vibrate with that energy of the people around us, and there's the people that we know and recognize are draining to us or are negative, but then there's a lot of people that we don't even realize how draining they really are until you get, home and you're like, "Phew, wow." The whatever your coping mechanism is, maybe it's I just need to lay down, or maybe it's I need to eat, or ooh, I need a drink, whatever any said person's thing is, I need to scroll and mind numb from that. And we've been like programmed to think negative. I mean, obviously the news, if anybody out there listening to this is still watching the news, please just stop. For God's sake, stop watching the news completely. There's nothing positive that you're going to get from it. I'm telling you. But, even as a child, everything has been focused on don't do that. Don't do that. Stop doing that. Everything is focused towards the negative, and where your energy goes, where your energy flows, your energy what is it? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
So if we're focusing what we don't want to do, oftentimes that's what so many people do, and that's why these words and these stories are so important. Because you ask somebody, you're like, "Okay, well," like, for example, if it's somebody who's looking for a partner, right? "Well, I just want somebody who's not gonna be whatever they're not gonna be selfish, and they're not gonna leave the toilet seat up, and they're not gonna be whatever." It's like, so you're focused on all the things you don't whatever it is. Stop focusing on what you don't want. What is it that you do want in a partner? And in fact, whatever's on your "I want" in my partner list, mirror that around. Are you that? Because that's where this real transformation happens, is if we vibrate like the people around us and we want to be around certain people, we have to start reflecting that too. And it's being conscious of the words.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to get into the negative of what we don't want. And they were like, "Oh my God, why am I said, I just don't want to be late. I just don't want to be late." Well, then what are you? You're late. I want to be on time. We think of how many times you say, "Don't forget your keys. Don't forget your keys." Well, we're focusing on forgetting our keys. Let's remember the keys. Remember your keys, and then you'll remember your keys. It's simple things like that. It's like, boom, you don't think this person's negative, but how many times have they said don't or stop or no, all the negations that get in our language? You're like, this is pretty negative.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. And I go back to I always think about the people who are really into NLP, neuro linguistic programming. They always say not to have if you're going to do like affirmations or something, not to do a negative one, like a don't or something like that, because that's
Mhm.
what you're going to do. Your brain's like doesn't
Exactly.
register the don't. Your brain is just like, okay, we'll do that.
Exactly. That's so true. And a whole nother layer of affirmations. And I did this with Cherry and Silver Luna in the Going Goddess podcast, where we went through a win story, a celebration story. And this is like a whole different level. Like, after you get unstuck and get all the gunk out and the yucky stories, you have capacity for the good to come in. Then the next level of what I do with the coaching is helping people empower the things they've already done, because part of the receiving and learning to receive is just in receiving. I do great things, you know? And what are those great things that I already do, that I already am? Because it's so hard to see those, or we can't even take compliments of people say something and it has to be like this bounce back, or whoa, well, it's not that great, or it could be better, whatever it is. Just take the compliment and be quiet. Just take it. Just I receive it. Just practice receiving it. But so this next level is you go through these celebration story, and based on your own story, we create custom affirmations based on your story, not me just saying, I am brave. If I don't have proof that I've done something brave and I just say all day, I'm brave, and I don't believe it, I'm actually looking for ways
Mm.
to disprove something. So just straight up affirmations. Definitely don't, oh, here we go in the negative. Don't have don't in there. Only have the what you want. But also, if you're writing an affirmation that you don't feel like you're worthy of, you're going to look for reasons to counteract it. So this process works on that side of it too, to remind you and build you up of like, yeah, I do great things, because it's so hard to see those things in ourselves until we can become the observer. So that was back to earlier. I do want to make this point of how you said you felt you didn't think you were going to have such a transition from the story that you knew to you reading it aloud. Well, what actually mechanically is happening there is we have all of these different thoughts and memories and stories that are in our heads, and it's all going at the same time. And whenever you slow down your thoughts enough to write them down or type them, either one, but if you wrote them down, you're physically connecting the thought to the paper and you're seeing it. So you're visually seeing it. So now you're becoming the observer, where before you were the participant and it was right here. Like it was this close whenever it's in your head and you're in the middle of the story. So when you write it down, even saying it just is one thing, but when you write it down, you really get more of the details to it. And then speaking it as you're reading it, it's like you're reading a story, because you're reading this story instead of it just being in there. So that's why you felt such a big difference. And then when you read it aloud, you're able to, again, the vibrations are coming out of your mouth. So you're seeing it, the vibrations are coming out, and you're actually transmuting that frequency out and speaking it to someone else. There's all these different levels. So it is emotional, and that release of like coming out, that's part of that happening in your body. Some people yawn a lot during the process. It's just like, are you about to fall asleep? No, that's just some people's release is a yawn. Some people it's laughing. They're like, I can't believe this story sounds so ridiculous now that like, I'm saying it out loud. Or they're crying. Some people it's burps. It comes in all different forms of the release that happens during this process. So I just wanted to circle back to that.
Well, and thinking about it, I'm sure that the people that you're talking with, they need to have a little release in
Yes,
around that story that's impactful for them, right? And yeah, so I'm a big crybaby to begin with, so I'm not surprised that I cried. It's yeah, I'm sure for everybody it's a little bit different in terms of like it's like almost like there's a tension built up with the story,
it is. It's
So
the breath trap.
when you can let it go, yeah,
It's the constriction. The
yeah,
story gets
absolutely.
tighter and constricted in your body. And when you read that story, like you'll feel it in your body. The first time you say it aloud, you're like, whew. Some people feel it in different places depending on where they hold it.
You have a good point because, yeah, the body keeps the score, right? So the thing that's weirdest to me, the thing that continues to be weird to me, even though I know it's legit, is that the stories and what actually happened to us is in our bodies and that it can feel really like stuck in our bodies. And so for me, I've noticed that walking is while I am in it's not even affirmations. It's like just trying to it's like pumping myself up, and be like, girl, like I'll be walking on my walking pad, girl, yeah, it was such a good week this week. That's like that sort of thing. I find that like the movement really helps because things do get stuck in our bodies. So I'm not surprised that people need to have a release because when you're letting go of the story, of course there's going to be a reaction.
Yeah, movement is so important for like all the reasons. And I'm glad that you noticed that. And that's something that people can look and feel like, okay, what is it that helps me release? And even just like we were talking about, having conversations and interactions with different people all the time, that we're absorbing all of those things from them. So that's always a good thing. If you've been in a heavy situation, to do something where you move your body, or you know that you're going to have a conversation with somebody, do it as you're moving your body outside. And especially if you can be outside, is great to be connected with nature. I do that whenever I know I'm going to have a conversation, that I don't, I'm not looking forward to, so that's what I
Mm.
want to do, is something where I'm moving my body, because it is that somatic release that's happening. So kudos to you.
Yeah, that's taken me a minute to figure out. You think it would be more intuitive, but it wasn't. So before we wrap up, Amanda, I would love for you to share with the people listening a little nugget. Like if they find that they're like, huh, maybe there's something that I want to explore. What's one small step that they can do towards evaluating what either the words that they're saying or starting to look at the story that may be impacting their life right now?
Honestly, it's how are you talking to yourself, as to be consciously aware of how you're talking to yourself. And again, whenever you're talking to yourself, just become aware of it. I'm not saying to beat yourself up, like we talked about that with, like you were talking about with the fish tacos. If you're like, oh, why am I do whatever, then you're counteracting what you're doing. You may as well just go the other direction. It's like people that go to the gym and you're like, hate that you're doing it, hate what you're doing so much, the energy that you're exerting in hating what you're doing or hating your body and you're doing it, you may as well have just skipped it. So just being conscious of the way that you're talking to yourself is first, and okay, I hear you and I'm not listening. And then just just practice of letting that go, not beating yourself up on what you're saying, but just noticing what you're saying. That's the first thing that I would push people or suggest people do. Yeah.
And I think when you first started to notice this, because I'm speaking from experience, I'm like, dang, I sometimes say some not so nice things to myself. It's like, I would never say that to a best friend. I would never say that to anybody else on the
You
street. You
wouldn't
know
say
what
it,
I mean?
no,
It's just like,
no. Yeah. Why do we do that? I think it's just
I
part of our
know, it's
makeup.
just wild.
So,
Yeah, it
and it takes
is.
the practice, because we've been doing it for how long, right? As long as we've been talking to ourselves, right? So it's been a minute. So it takes practice. That's why these stories are it's not a one and done. It's a one and a few, and it could be a lot and it could be less. But once you know the process, then you have the tool to do it. And if you have another person, have a coach that's going to help guide you through asking these questions, like we went through, to get to like what's the underlying message here. But yeah, it takes a practice, and it starts with acknowledging how you're talking, and then practicing not saying the bad things, and then you can practice start saying the good things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely. Like everything else, when we're going to change something about our lives, it does take a minute. It does take a second to actually change that. And really talking trash to ourselves is a habit. And I always say to myself, well, if it's a habit, I can change it. I can change it to so that I can have a better habit, a habit that like is better for my heart and soul, right?
Yeah.
Than like talking trash to myself. Yeah. I'm so glad that you were here with me today to talk about this because I think this is really, I think, integral work as someone who has been working on herself for more than a minute, right? Like you were mentioning, it's just this type of work, it is really different than a lot of other things. And like I said, I'm not knocking. I always knock on talk therapy, but that doesn't do it for me. But there's a lot of other modalities that do. And I think that that's one of the important things that I'd like to share with people is that I've done so many healing modalities, and some of them have such a huge impact, and we don't even know that they're available to us. So Obviously, like, I think if you could rewrite your own story and have that be what your life is all about, like, why not? Right? That sounds like an amazing decision to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining us today, Amanda. Before we break, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to and how people can find out more about working with you?
So, things that I'm working on, the greatest thing I've noticed about this tool with the stories is it works hand in hand with so many different modalities. So, like this upcoming weekend, I'm hosting an event that is going to involve, again, getting in with the body and the words and the breath and all the pieces, where it's going to have yoga, and then we're incorporating human design, and then the story work, and then conscious connection with cannabis and breath work. So I'm doing that one, and then next month I'm going to do another one that's more specifically focused on the body. The good thing about this work can go hand in hand with whatever modality that you're working on. Like you mentioned earlier, there's so many different tools out there. And what I'll just remind people is, if you're trying something and you feel like you're just getting stuck and you're not making progress, you're like, okay, I know that like something is happening, but it's not progressing, whatever it is, you need additional support. Then I'm out there. I have a community group where we have calls and we're going through this practice together. I found so valuable to have a group to talk through these things, because oftentimes we feel so alone and so isolated that my story is so big, my story is so wild and crazy. And surprisingly, you meet someone and their story mirrors almost the exact same thing, just a few different details. So having a community where you can share has been so valuable for me. So that's what I created, so that people have a safe space to share and for us to learn from each other. We work through the story work and language games together, and also do one-on-one coaching. So if there's anybody who wants to take this to a deeper level, they can join the community to be on the monthly calls and or do the private one-on-one sessions, which I highly recommend. And like I mentioned before, the thing I love the most about it is this tool is simple. I'm not saying this is an easy fix. This isn't a magical pill, right? But this is a magical pen that you have at your own disposal, that you can get through this with guidance and then be able to use this tool on your own. This isn't like you've got to go to the chiropractor from now until infinity, like, or whatever, some of those things. Like, once you start shaving your legs, Amanda, you're going to shave them forever, whatever. Like, you remember that story? We all had that one, right? What they would think now. But that's the greatest thing to me, is it is something that you can learn and work through and then utilize it on the regular basis of things that come up that weren't originally in the story, or you can use just normal day-to-day life, be life in. You have a resource to do it. So,
That's so great. Thanks so much for
yeah.
sharing that. And I'm going to have all the links to Amanda's, how to reach her, and the things that she has coming up. I'm going to have all that in the description. So be sure to reach out to her, especially if you feel like this is connected with you. Because, like I said, I've done a lot of different things, and this was different in such a lovely, good way that, yeah, I highly recommend it and think y'all should check it out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a pleasure and beautiful conversation. I just love sharing all of this with all the listening ears out there.
Thanks so much for being here. And thank you so much for sharing what you do with me. It was very impactful, and I really appreciate that.
For sure.
All right. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week with another episode of My Villain Era. Take care.